The sound of dripping water filled the quiet laundry room, each drop echoing like a countdown. Claire's chest tightened as she stared at the warped trapdoor in the corner, its edges damp and grimy as though it had been hidden for decades. Her flashlight flickered, casting fleeting shadows across the room, and she caught the faintest sound of scratching, like fingernails dragged across rotted wood. Swallowing her rising panic, she stepped closer, the darkness beneath the trapdoor yawning like a maw ready to swallow her whole. Claire's foot landed on the first step, the wood groaning beneath her weight as she descended into the suffocating darkness. The basement stretched impossibly far, its corners swallowed by shifting shadows that seemed alive. The damp walls oozed with a thick liquid that wasn't water, its metallic stench clawing at her throat. As she squelched through the muck below, Ethan's cries grew louder, though they sounded wrong, like someone twisting a child's voice into a grotesque melody. A wet, rasping breath grazed Claire's ear, sending an icy jolt through her veins. Spinning around, her flashlight's flickering beam caught the creature's grotesque form. A face stretched into a lipless grin, its lidless eyes fixated on her with chilling intent. Its gray, mottled skin pulsed with black veins that seemed alive, and its claws dripped with the same vile liquid that coated the walls. Frozen in terror, Claire stumbled backward as the creature slinked closer, its grin widening as though savoring her fare. Claire's breath caught as she entered the cavernous room, her flashlight illuminating walls that seemed to shift and writhe like living flesh. The pit at the center glowed faintly, its edges inscribed with pulsing symbols that made her head ache. Suspended above the pit was Ethan, his wide, terrified eyes locked onto hers as he mouthed a single word: "Run." The creature materialized from the shadows, taller and more grotesque now, its claws scraping the ground as it grinned at her with inhuman delight. The basement seemed alive as Claire ran, its walls pulsating and closing in as the creature's laughter echoed behind her. Her flashlight bounced wildly, casting erratic shadows that twisted into grotesque shapes. Her lungs burned, her legs felt leaden, and the stairs seemed endlessly far. Behind her, the creature's distorted voice called out, layered with countless others. "Stay, play with us." She scrambled up the steps, her heart hammering as she reached for the trap door, only to find herself in a place far worse than she could have imagined. Claire gasped as she emerged into the unfamiliar room, its walls adorned with warped, nightmarish scenes that seemed to shift as she moved. A mirror on the far wall reflected not her, but the creature looming behind her, its lipless grin stretching impossibly wide. Her heart pounded as she turned, only to see the empty space where the creature should have been. In the mirror, Ethan appeared, his glassy eyes filled with tears, mouthing that same word: "Run." The hallway stretched endlessly before Claire, twisting and warping as though alive, its walls glistening with the dark fluid that clung to everything in this nightmare. Faint handprints, glowing with an otherworldly light, smeared the walls, their shapes too small to be human. Claire's footsteps echoed unnaturally, each step accompanied by the faint whisper of a voice she didn't recognize. The door at the end seemed to pulse with energy, beckoning her forward, while her instincts screamed for her to turn back. Claire's flashlight beam cut through the mist as she entered the room, her breath hitching at the sight of the figures that surrounded her. Dozens of children stood eerily still, their glowing eyes locked onto her as whispers filled the air, a chorus of pain and despair. The symbols on the walls pulsed in rhythm with the whispers, their meaning just out of reach but deeply unsettling. One child stepped forward, its movements jerky and unnatural, and in a voice layered with countless others, it whispered, "You shouldn't have come." The lair was a vision of hell, the air thick with the stench of decay and sulfur. Claire's eyes locked onto the throne of bones, where the creature lounged like a king savoring its prey. Its glowing eyes followed her every move, its grin widening as if feeding off her fear. Around the room, shadows shifted and coalesced, whispering her name in distorted voices. "You've come so far," the creature said, its voice a symphony of torment. Claire stood trembling on the edge of the platform, the void around her whispering threats and promises in equal measure. The creature loomed before her, its movements unnaturally fluid as it stepped closer, its claws gleaming in the strange light. Her grip on the crowbar tightened, her fear giving way to a desperate resolve. "You won't have him," she screamed, her voice shaking but firm. The creature's laughter echoed through the abyss as it lunged, and Claire braced herself for the fight of her life.